In the end, there always seems to be some sort of compromise at EU summits. In the case of Greece and the euro, this time the answer is not yet. In the case of mandatory burden sharing on migrants, the answer is no, nay, and perhaps never. The gulf among EU leaders is in fact growing over how to handle an unprecedented wave of migrants. And as we can show you, they're not all coming by boat through Italy. Hungary going on the offensive with the construction of a wall at the Serbian border and attempts to refuse entry for those sent back from Austria and Germany. At the other end of the continent, a strike at the French entrance to the Eurotunnel Tuesday, prompting migrants to try and rush Britain-bound trucks, and the UK Prime Minister blaming port of entry Italy for those migrants. The French, who've also been trying to keep migrants on the Italian side of the border, spared this time in those remarks by David Cameron to the Commons, with nations rejecting suggested burden-sharing quotas to relieve frontline states like Italy, Greece, and Hungary. What is the alternative? What lasting impact will it all have on the ideal of a European Union? Today in the France 24 debate, the EU divide over migrants. And joining us from Budapest, Zoltán Kovács, he's the spokesperson for the Hungarian government. Many thanks for being with us on France 24. Also joining us is Ursula Plassard. She is the Austrian ambassador to France, former foreign minister from Vienna. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And from Manchester, Sajjad Karim, who we just saw a moment ago. Sajjad Karim, member of the European Parliament from the British Conservative Party. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. On the eve of the summit, Hungary backtracking on foregoing the EU's point of entry rule. That's the one that states that all migrants and asylum seekers must be processed in the country by which they enter the single market. Now, the reversal follows strong protests from Germany and Austria, which considered, in the case of Austria, the interior minister said that Vienna had even considered suing.
It would be a massive problem for us, because we are not responsible for lots of incoming asylum seekers, but countries like Hungary, Greece or Italy are.
The Hungarian government has learned that Austria and 10 other EU countries want to send back to Hungary illegal and economic migrants. These illegal migrants did not enter the EU through Hungary, but via Greece. Our view, therefore, is that they must be sent back to Greece.
They must be sent back to Greece. Ursula Plassard, we're going to try to get the connection with Budapest, but let me ask you, because yesterday where you were sitting was the Hungarian ambassador. He was emphatic that these people did not enter the EU through Hungary.
Well, it shows, and your first contribution has already shown that several countries do have serious problems. We are facing a huge challenge, all of us, and not enough emphasis has been given, also media attention and political attention, to the so-called Balkan route, which has become the one road into the European Union, into the Schengen area, that takes in the majority of people in 2015. But this is a process that has not received sufficient political attention. I hope that this will be considered today at the European Council. I'm quite confident on that.
What say you, though, when the Hungarians claim that the Austrians are sending them 5,000 people who never came through their country first?
From all I know, this is a misunderstanding or simply not true, because what the issue between Hungary and Austria was yesterday was that Hungarians announced that they would suspend or stop implementing their obligations under the Dublin III agreement. Now, the Dublin III agreement provides that you have to take back asylum seekers who have, according to the rules, to make their application in the country of first arrival inside the Schengen zone. This is a process that is routine and that is agreed and managed on interstate level. So it was also the case between Austria and Hungary, the number was much, much smaller. From what my information was, it was something like 30 or 40 people, and they were agreed between Austria and Hungary. And then all of a sudden, Hungary declared they would not take these asylum seekers,
claiming they had they'd entered the EU through Greece, not through Hungary.
This is not part of the argument, but the agreement between Hungary and Austria that had existed on the level of ministries of interior was not respected. Now, from what I understand, Hungary has made it clear today that there was maybe a certain amount of semantic misunderstanding, but the problems as such remain and have to be dealt with.
All right, Hungary reversing itself, backtracking after just 24 hours on this. But there some who are watching this closely saying that the Hungarians, in point of fact, are still ignoring the rule because they're saying they don't have the means right now to process everyone. They're swamped. What's your reaction to that?
Well, everybody is in an exceptional situation. We are in confronting an emergency situation. This is an urgency situation. This is the biggest challenge we are facing in terms of migratory flows and asylum seekers since Second World War. So this is Frontex saying this, and we will have to face up to that challenge. We can only do that with solidarity inside our countries. In Austria, you have, like in other countries, numerous meetings at that very moment going on with the local municipalities, with the national government to arrive at a fair burden sharing of asylum seekers and temporary shelters at that very moment, but we also need it on the European level, and this is what the ongoing European Council is all about.
Ursula Plassard mentioning there the Balkan route. For that, let's cross to our correspondent in Belgrade, Laurent Rouy. Thank you for being with us in the France 24 debate. Laurent, you're the other side of the Hungarian border. What's the situation there?
Well, there is an estimated 1,000 refugees or asylum seekers that are entering Serbia in those days. We are speaking about a new wave of immigrants, of refugees, of about an estimated 13,000 people who set foot on last week from Turkey, and they are now somewhere between Turkey and Hungary. Normally, the road they take is from Turkey, and they enter into Greek islands through the sea. It's very close. And then they go to continental Greece. Then they enter into the Republic of Macedonia. And then in Serbia, where I am now. And then from the northern Serbia, they try to enter into Hungary. And that's the route. So we are speaking about 1,000 people entering every day in Serbia, arriving in the small town in South country in Preševo. And for the moment, there is no facility to welcome them. There is no NGO, there is no humanitarian help to welcome them. They all say that this is a very, very hard situation. For the moment, only Doctors Without Borders, the French NGO Médecins du Monde, organized a makeshift clinic to cure them, because, I mean, they have a lot of wounds, especially on the feet after such long walking. But this is the only facility these immigrants can access to. So they try to move on quickly and to reach the EU, especially before Hungary to build the fence they told they would build.
What proportion of these are Syrians?
Well, it's about 60% Syrians in those groups. I mean, people who were refugees in neighboring Turkey. I mean, Turkey as a neighbor of Syria. And then they started to come very recently. I met some of them, and there were not all of them were for a long time on the road. Some were on the roads for months, but others just left Syria about 2-3 weeks ago. And now these people are in Serbia, or maybe even further. We are speaking about 60% of this wave being so from Syria. The other come from Iraq, Afghanistan. I mean, these are two countries which are very much represented in these refugees, in this population. And then the other come from various countries from Africa and Asia. I mean, it's a real mix. It's about 60% Syria, 20% Iraqi and Afghani, and the rest from many, many places.
Well, let's turn to Sajjad Karim on this. Sajjad, what's your reaction when you hear Laurent Ruy talk about 1,000 arriving just in the past week? And coming from Syria, let's not forget that the neighboring states of Syria feeling the full brunt of this displacement of populations. It puts it into perspective, the numbers we're talking about.
Well, good evening. And absolutely, this is, as Frontex have been saying, a real humanitarian crisis that is today unfolding. And I recall as far back as 2.5 years ago, being in Lebanon and seeing the extreme pressure that a very small country like Lebanon was being put under, and also seeing in Turkey the types of conditions that so many refugees were having to live in at that stage. Now, of course, the numbers are increasing. The situation remains fluid, and it is ongoing. The refugees are not only from 2 years before, but we have very recent people as well that are clearly fleeing Syria and also Libya in order to escape very dangerous situations. And as early as the day before yesterday, we recovered 3,700 people from the Mediterranean. But of course, there are other routes by which people are making their way into the European Union, and Ursula provided quite correctly some of the details as to what is happening on the Hungarian border.
The numbers of people that we're talking about bringing in to the European Union as asylum seekers under that provision to share the burden on asylum seekers that's now been dropped by the EU summit seems very small compared to the size of the problem. What are your thoughts on the fact that this mandatory burden sharing has been dropped?
Well, I always thought it was far too ambitious a statement for the European Commission to be making without having, first of all, properly consulted the member states. And the natural consequence of that was always going to be what has happened today, the very first opportunity that member states have had to actually sit together around a table with the Commission. They have spelt out that a mandatory imposition of figures is not something that is going to be acceptable to them. However, it's still encouraging that they have agreed that voluntary figures is something that remains on the table in order to try and share the burden. But equally, I think it's absolutely essential and important that we as a European Union certainly need to invest much more to tackle this problem at source, and in particular those people who are acting as people traffickers are the ones whose activities need to be addressed and stopped with immediate effect.
Let me ask you, Ursula Plassard, voluntary quotas, how far will that go in the current context? We've seen a string of elections where anti-immigrant parties have made huge inroads, including here in France.
There is a lot of populist pressure from populist parties and movements, no doubt about that, in various European countries. But there is also a lack of fairness, I have to insist, because if you look at the figures, it is really 8 or 9 countries out of 28 EU members who carry some 80% of the burden. On the other hand, I don't want to speak of burden because these are people looking for shelter. They are fleeing from persecution, from war, from immediate danger for their lives. And this is also a specific feature, if you want, of the Balkan route, that here the vast majority of people coming through that route are not illegal migrants in that sense, but they are people who would then qualify after going through the legal procedure as refugees according to the Geneva Convention, very strict standards.
As genuine asylum seekers. And I just want to go back to something that Laurent Ruy said. He seems to be making the argument there that Hungary is making. If the route these people take is first to go to Greek islands, then to go through Serbia, then it is, if you follow this point of entry rule that you have in the European Union, then it is Greece's problem, not Hungary's problem.
We will not win by trying to shift the blame from one country to the other, because this is just the reason why we have to come to a European agreement. Greece has a lot of difficulties. We are talking about the economic difficulties of Greece, and we are aware that it is a particular stress at this moment for the Greek authorities to also deal with this huge influx of migrants, of asylum seekers. The European Court of Justice has stated that the standards of for asylum seekers in Greece are in some parts not sufficient. So, there's a problem of getting them back, pushing them back into Greece. So Hungary is, of course, right in saying we are not the only ones. We cannot be blamed. Hungary is suffering a huge increase in asylum seekers, but we will all have to make sure that the external border of the European Union is sufficiently monitored. It is not enough to invest in the technical equipment that we have put there on the external Schengen border, if you want, but we will always also have to have well-trained staff, people who are competent to handle the situation. We will have to fight corruption because it is very tempting, and somebody has to say that openly, for a border control person who has a monthly salary of some 300 euro. If somebody comes along and shows him a 100 euro note. So we will have to combat corruption. We will have to find better way to protect the frontiers.
So this building of a wall between Serbia and Hungary, what you're suggesting then is that it's not the best way to spend the money.
No, it's not a good way to spend the money. Nobody wants fences and walls in Europe. We've had that stage. But what we need is a better screening procedure and screening capacities, and that might be one of the forward-looking roads in the European Union.
All right, we're now joined by the Hungarian government spokesperson, Zoltán Kovács. Apologies for the technical issues we had earlier. What's your reaction to what Ambassador Plassard just said?
Thank you for the opportunity. I've heard not all of what she stated, but I would rather mainly agree what she stated about the Western Balkan route and Hungary's position. Now, we have to face reality and the facts, and that is that asylum seekers are coming to the European Union through the Hungarian and therefore the Schengen border illegally. So our first point we would like to sort out how to control, how to get into this process in a way that migrants, illegal migrants, are going to be controlled. So they pass the Hungarian, therefore the Schengen borders in a regular manner through the official entry point. And at this moment, basically all capacities are tied on the southern borders with Serbia to be able to handle the situation. Let alone this year, we have already reached 61,000 people who have entered Hungary illegally. And that, again, is very important to stress that illegal border crossing is a crime. And it's nobody's interest, I believe. No European country would let this happen wherever it happens. That would make actually Hungary the most effective country in the European Union, because these numbers, we are following entirely all Schengen and Dublin protocols at the moment. So we are registering everybody who is entering or coming through the
Are you still refusing to take in? Are you still refusing, though, to take in some of those that are being sent back by Austria?
We, at the moment, are not able to receive back anybody whose request for asylum was rejected in other European countries. We have, therefore, notified 11 European countries that, at the moment, we are not able to take them back. There's a good reason for that. The Hungarian system was equipped with the capacity of only around 3,000 places in the temporary shelters. We are trying to make this a higher number, but at the moment we are running 300%.
At the moment you're swamped. We're going to have to take a very quick break. I hope you can stay with us for a short while, Zoltán Kovács, because we'll be back here watching the France 24 debate.